The daycare center had operated for 8 years. Licensed facility. State inspections passed consistently. Positive reviews from parents. Located in a residential neighborhood where families appreciated the convenient location and affordable rates. The staff seemed caring and professional. Nothing raised concerns, but missing children cases had been accumulating across the region. Over 2 years, 11 children had disappeared under circumstances that didn't fit typical patterns. Not abductions from parks or streets, not custody disputes. Children who simply vanished from environments where they should have been safe. Some disappeared from schools, others from after-school programs. 2 had last been seen at daycare facilities. The cases seemed unconnected initially. Different locations, different ages, different family circumstances. But federal investigators examining child exploitation networks noticed commonalities. All 11 families had used childcare services operated by facilities connected to a single licensing and management company. The connection was obscured through various business entities, but financial analysis revealed the same ultimate ownership structure. The management company oversaw 17 childcare facilities across 4 states. Most operated normally with no indication of problems. But 2 facilities had been locations where missing children were last seen. That pattern triggered intensive investigation. Background checks on all staff at those facilities. Financial audits, interviews with families who had used the services. One staff member at the daycare center drew attention. His background check showed previous employment at 3 other facilities operated by the management company. He had moved between locations over 5 years. And at 2 of those previous locations, children had gone missing shortly after his employment period. The correlation wasn't proof, but it was significant enough to warrant surveillance. Financial investigation revealed unusual transactions. The staff member received payments beyond his declared salary. Money arrived through wire transfers from accounts connected to international networks known for child exploitation. His bank activity showed patterns consistent with receiving payments for services beyond legitimate employment. The breakthrough came from digital forensics. A separate investigation into online child exploitation networks had seized servers containing encrypted communications. Decryption revealed discussions about procurement, transportation, and delivery of children to buyers overseas. One communication thread mentioned a provider at a facility matching the daycare center's description. The provider was scheduled to deliver merchandise within the next 72 hours. The investigation became urgent. If the communication was accurate, a child at the daycare center was targeted for abduction within 3 days. But which child? The facility served 35 children, ranging from infants to pre-kindergarten age. Surveillance was intensified. Federal agents watched the facility continuously. Parents dropping off and picking up children were documented. Staff movements were tracked. The suspect staff member was observed behaving normally during operating hours. But after closing, he remained in the building longer than necessary. Thermal imaging showed he accessed areas of the facility that should have been empty. Communications intercepts captured encrypted messages from his phone to unknown recipients. The content couldn't be read, but the pattern suggested coordination of an imminent operation. Federal warrants were obtained. The target was the daycare center and the suspect's residence. The objective was to prevent abduction, rescue any children already taken, and arrest anyone involved in the network. But the tactical challenge was executing a raid at a childcare facility without traumatizing the children present during operating hours or missing a critical window if the abduction was planned outside normal hours. The decision was made to execute during the night after the facility closed. Surveillance would track the suspect. If he left normally, he would be arrested away from the center and his residence would be raided simultaneously. But if he remained after hours, the daycare center would be entered and he would be taken into custody there. The surveillance that evening confirmed the concerning pattern. The daycare closed at 6. Parents picked up all children by 6:30. Staff departed by 7, but the suspect remained. Lights visible in the back area of the facility. His vehicle still in the parking lot. He was staying after everyone else had left. The tactical team moved into position. The facility was surrounded. All exits secured. At 9:30, the breach was executed. The front entrance was opened using a key override obtained through the warrant. The tactical team entered quietly, moving through the building to locate the suspect without alerting him to their presence. He was found in a storage area that had been converted into a concealed space behind supply shelves. The room contained a computer, communications equipment, and documentation. He was alone. No children were present. He was taken into custody without resistance, but the computer was running and unlocked. On the screen were communications with buyers and a file directory labeled with dates. The most recent date was that night. The file contained photographs of a child from the daycare center, background information about the family, pickup schedules, and a plan. The child was to be taken during a scheduled pickup the next afternoon. The suspect would claim there was a family emergency and he had authorization to release the child to a family friend. The person picking up the child would be part of the trafficking network. Once in their custody, the child would be transported out of state and ultimately delivered to an overseas buyer. The plan was detailed and would have appeared legitimate. The suspect had access to family contact information. He had observed pickup routines. He knew which children had working parents who sometimes sent others to collect them. The cover story was designed to seem plausible during the critical moments when the child would be handed over. The raid had stopped it. 24 hours before execution. The child targeted was safe at home with no idea how close to danger they had been. But the computer revealed more. This wasn't the first time. Files showed 6 previous operations. Children taken using similar methods from facilities where the suspect had worked. Photographs, family background information, delivery confirmations to buyers. The files matched 6 of the 11 missing children. The suspect had been the mechanism, working at childcare facilities, identifying vulnerable targets, planning abductions that would seem legitimate initially, handing children over to trafficking networks in ways that created confusion and delayed response until the children were far from the abduction location. But the files also revealed the network. The suspect was a procurement operative. He identified and delivered children, but others handled transportation, documentation, and delivery to final buyers. The communications showed a network of at least 12 people operating across multiple states. Some worked at childcare facilities, others provided transportation. Some created false documentation for moving children across borders, others coordinated with buyers overseas. Federal coordination was immediate. The suspect's arrest triggered simultaneous operations. 3 other individuals working at childcare facilities in different states were arrested. 2 transportation coordinators were taken into custody. A document forger was raided at a location where false birth certificates and travel papers were being produced. The network was being dismantled in real time, but the critical priority was the missing children. The files showed 6 had been taken by the suspect. Where were they? Communications logs provided leads. Transportation records showed routing. Buyer contacts gave destination information. International cooperation was initiated with law enforcement. Within 48 hours, 2 children were recovered. They had been delivered to buyers overseas but had not yet been moved to final locations. Coordinated raids by international partners resulted in arrests and rescue. The children, both under age 5, were recovered and repatriated. They had been missing for 7 and 11 months respectively. They would require extensive support, but they were alive. 3 more children were located through investigation of the network's communications. All had been held in transit locations awaiting final delivery. Raids at those locations freed them and arrested the individuals holding them. The children ranged in age from 3 to 6. They had been missing for periods from 4 months to over a year. Medical and psychological evaluation began immediately. All would be returned to their families once cleared by medical teams. One child remained missing. The files showed delivery had been completed over a year earlier to a buyer in a country without extradition agreements or cooperative law enforcement relationships. Efforts to locate that child continued through diplomatic channels and international child welfare organizations. The case remained open and active, but 5 children were recovered directly because of the daycare center raid. 5 children who had been missing, whose families had been devastated by their disappearance, were found because investigators stopped one suspect 24 hours before he could take another child. The suspect was interrogated and eventually cooperated. He described the network's operations, how he was recruited through online exploitation forums, how he was placed in childcare facilities by the management company, which was controlled by the Trafficking network, how he identified children whose family situations made them vulnerable, how the abductions were planned to seem legitimate initially, creating confusion and delay. He provided information about the management company's role. It wasn't just providing cover, it was actively recruiting operatives and placing them in facilities where they could access children. The company operated 17 facilities. 7 had operatives working for the Trafficking network. The other 10 were legitimate operations used to make federal raids secured all 17 facilities. The 7 with trafficking operatives were shut down immediately. Children at those facilities were accounted for, and parents were notified about the investigation. The 10 legitimate facilities were placed under new management with enhanced oversight, while investigation determined the management company's owners were arrested. They had created the business specifically to enable child trafficking. The legitimate facilities provided cover and revenue. The compromised facilities provided access to victims. The structure allowed systematic exploitation while maintaining a facade of respectable childcare services. Parents whose children had attended the facilities were devastated. They had trusted these centers with their children's safety. Learning that trafficking operatives had been working there, that children had been targeted and taken, created profound trauma. Support services were provided to all families who had used the facilities: counseling, legal assistance, resources for addressing the psychological impact. The 5 recovered children required comprehensive support, medical care for any physical harm, psychological treatment for trauma, reintegration support for returning to families after months of separation, specialized services for young children who had been trafficked. Each case required individualized care plans developed by teams of experts in child welfare and trauma recovery. The families were reunited with their children in carefully managed processes. The children needed time to readjust. Some didn't remember their families clearly after months away. Others were traumatized by their experiences and needed gradual reintroduction. Specialists worked with each family to facilitate reunification in ways that prioritized the children's psychological safety. Federal prosecutions moved forward. The suspect arrested at the daycare center faced charges for each child he had taken: 6 counts of kidnapping, conspiracy to traffic children, exploitation offenses. Evidence was overwhelming. His own files documented everything. He received a sentence of life without parole. The network members arrested faced similar charges. The management company owners got life sentences for operating a trafficking network through childcare facilities. The transportation coordinators received 30 to 40 years. The document forger got 25 years. Everyone who participated knowingly in taking children from families faced decades in prison. But the case's impact extended beyond prosecutions. Reforms were implemented in childcare licensing. Enhanced background checks, including financial audits to identify suspicious income. Monitoring of staff who moved between facilities frequently. Coordination between state licensing agencies to track patterns across jurisdictions. Requirements for facilities to report staff who showed unusual interest in family situations or pickup routines. The management company's business model had exploited gaps in oversight. Individual facilities were inspected and licensed by states, but the corporate structure connecting them wasn't monitored. Staff moving between facilities under the same management didn't trigger reviews. The system assumed each facility operated independently. The reality was coordinated exploitation across legislative attention followed. Federal laws strengthening oversight of multi-facility childcare companies. Requirements for transparency and ownership. Structures. Mandatory reporting of corporate connections between licensed facilities. Enhanced penalties for using childcare services at the daycare center where the suspect was arrested was closed permanently. The building was sold and repurposed. Parents whose children had attended didn't want it to remain a childcare facility. The community's trust had been violated. The location would always be associated with the horrifying discovery of trafficking operations hidden within what should have been a safe environment for children. But that raid stopped a planned abduction. 24 hours before a child would have been taken. The files on the suspect's computer showed every detail. Which child? What method? What time? What cover story? Everything was ready. If the raid had been delayed even one day, another family would have lost a child to a trafficking network. The investigation had taken months. Financial analysis, surveillance, digital forensics, international cooperation, all building to the moment when tactical teams entered the daycare center after hours and found the suspect in a concealed room planning an abduction scheduled for the next afternoon. That one arrest revealed the network. 12 people operating across multiple states, 7 childcare facilities compromised, 6 children already taken, 5 recovered because the suspect's files provided location information, families reunited with children who had been missing for months. The tactical team had entered expecting to arrest one suspect and prevent one abduction. They found a network, a systematic operation, a trafficking organization that had created an entire child care management company to facilitate access to victims, files documenting 6 previous abductions, plans for a 7th scheduled for the next day. The raid stopped it. The child targeted went to daycare the next day with no idea they had been selected for abduction. The parents dropped them off and picked them up normally, unaware that federal agents had prevented their child from being handed over to traffickers and disappearing into an international exploitation network. 5 other families got their children back. Children who had been missing. Children they feared they would never see again. Children who were located because one suspect's arrest exposed the network and provided intelligence that led directly to recovery operations. The daycare center raid became a model for investigating child trafficking networks that use legitimate businesses as cover. How financial analysis can reveal suspicious patterns. How surveillance can identify operatives. How digital forensics can expose networks. How one arrest can cascade into dismantling an entire operation if properly exploited for intelligence. But the core achievement was simpler. A child was going to be taken. The plan was ready. The execution was scheduled, and tactical teams intervened 24 hours before it would have happened. They arrested the suspect, seized the files, exposed the network, and prevented another family from experiencing the devastation of a missing child. The children who were recovered faced long healing processes. Trauma doesn't resolve quickly. Trust is rebuilt gradually. Families needed support and resources to help children recover from experiences that should never have happened. Some would struggle for years. Others would show remarkable resilience. All would carry the impact of what they had endured. But they were home. They were safe. They were with their families. Because investigators tracked patterns across missing children cases. Because financial analysis revealed suspicious connections. Because surveillance identified a suspect. Because a raid was executed at exactly the right moment, after the suspect revealed his plans but before he could execute them. 24 hours. That's how close it came. One more day and another child would have been gone. Instead, tactical teams entered a daycare center after hours. found a suspect in a hidden room, seized the computer showing his plans, and stopped an abduction that would have destroyed another family. The raid saved one child from being taken, and the intelligence it generated saved 5 more who had already been lost. 6 families, 5 reunited with missing children, 1 who never experienced the loss because it was prevented. The SWAT teams had executed a warrant at a daycare center. They had arrested 1 suspect planning 1 abduction, and they had discovered he was part of a network that had taken 6 children and was preparing to take a 7th. The doors were breached. The suspect was arrested. The computer was seized, and the files it contained led to 5 recoveries and stopped a planned abduction that was scheduled for the next afternoon when a child would have been handed over to traffickers disguised as family friends picking up from daycare.